Good morning and welcome to the CADclass podcast. I'm Josh.
I'm Jake.
I was like, hello, Jake, are you there?
Hey, what's up?
And every week we talk about all things CAD, 3D printing, making, and we answer your questions live. Jake, we've got a great episode today. We're going to talk a little bit about...
No, go ahead. I'm
super
super excited to talk about what we're talking about today. I'm going to jump in.
About what
we're talking about development in general, about ideas and kind of wading into the scary parts of making and the scary parts of learning new things. And when you get too deep into something and you're like, oh my God, do I really want to continue into this new field? Should I just dive in? Should I stop? All that good stuff. We're going to be chatting because I'm currently doing that right now. But we'll be going over that in a little bit. Josh, let's say hi to our audience today.
I love it. So, a morning to the number one. Cadence was first here this morning with the shout out. Derry, good morning, Derry. Good morning, PC Van Fleet, Spitfire, Ogre, Joestry. We have the crew in the house. So, well, Sam.
Can I just say
Sam in the house?
when we were going through some branding stuff, Josh and I were playing around with the idea of having like a mascot. Because like Make Magazine has like the little red robot that everyone loves. Matter Hackers has this little like test print robot that we really dig. And we were playing around with the idea and we're like, oh, what would we name it? And we're like, what's a name that starts with CAD? And immediately I just went, Cadence. It's perfect.
There you go.
So if we ever do make a mascot, Cadence, it is in dedication of you. For such a handy, easy name to pick.
That's right. That's right.
But fantastic. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Super duper active week on the Discord. I think everyone is like really gearing into some projects. A ton of talk about 3D printing and a bunch of different problems that people are having. And it's just still reminds me just how difficult it is to troubleshoot problems with a 3D printer, because there's so many things that can go wrong that make to one problem. That's literally the topic of the video we're going to be publishing this Friday, where how do you solve just one problem? Because there's usually maybe like a dozen reasons that could be causing this one problem, and how do you actually troubleshoot and go through the process and eliminate different areas to actually find it. But oh my gosh, just if we were to do this, if I think it was key to like, if they were having this problem and they just posted this into the ether of the internet, God, that would be infuriating to solve that. I'm just so stoked for our little community. I just get so happy with these guys.
Same. I mean, I to your point. So when I was in person with our SAC innovation program, one of the students was having a problem with he's like, every time I try to print, my print fails. I can never get the actual nozzle to print filament. And because of the way that he framed the question about nozzle printing and things like this, we started to go down this rabbit hole of troubleshooting. I was kind of on the phone and I said, okay, you know what? We weren't getting anywhere. I said, just bring the printer in. And it turns out what he had done was that he hadn't tightened the extruder that goes back and forth on the x-axis. And it was wobbly. And because it was wobbly, as he was trying to level the bed, the nozzle was pushing into the bed. And so it was just, it was smushing, literally blocking that nozzle off because it was putting too much pressure, because there was a wobble there and he couldn't accurately level the bed. How do you get to that? I think these are hard questions. This is a kind of a larger topic too, because when we present this to homeschools and students and charter schools and things like that, I think one of the big themes for us is these skills. If you can master troubleshooting a 3D printer, you are very, very good at problem solving. And
definitely,
when it boils down to it, the most important skill that you can develop over the course of your life is to problem solve, troubleshoot.
Because it's immediately applicable to any area, regardless if it's a physical tool like a 3D printer or a drill or digital.
Every school needs it, every teacher needs it, every individual needs it. Yeah, keep going.
The amount of people that I see that are basically, oh, I'm the tech guy at my school or at my office. And they just go, the difference between me and you is that I know how to Google the right way to find the problem. And then it's like every single time that there's a problem, I have found the solution not because I know everything about computers. Nobody does. It is how I search for it, and I think that is an often misunderstood skill. In the same way, when we were at the workshop having shop techs, that I think people just go, oh, they're just like technicians. They just kind of have a wrench and a screwdriver on them. To know the intricacies of all of these tools, I don't think it's too out of line to say it's like veterinarians, where they are anatomists of multiple species, to say that they know how to fix problems with this animal, but they know how to fix problems with these machines, and they can identify the effect. Oh, it's making this squeak, this frequency, it's chippering. Oh, it has to be this bearing in this area. It's wild. It always blew me away. Yeah, maintenance people are just
Totally agree.
Amazing.
I think it boils down to this: creativity plus problem solving equals world domination / life domination, right? So if you can go about things creatively, because a lot of times, one of the things that inspired me a while back, I want to go on this tangent for just a second. One of the things that inspired me a while back was when I was looking and reading about Cuban car folks. So there's this whole culture. Cuba obviously had some issues. It's very poor in general, and so a lot of the cars they have are old, like very
1950s, like gorgeous.
And when you take them into the shop, one of the things that stands out is those guys can fix anything with anything. So the ingenuity that came from having to solve a problem with limited resources. And by the way, a lot of people think, oh, I'll start my business when I have a lot of money. Oh, I'll do the thing. Virgin, the airplane company, was started by Richard Branson when he had no money. He started it with $0 and it was bootstrapped. So if you can raise money to buy a plane and convince the company that you can lease it, right? So my point here is like, it's the creativity.
Can I just have a little plug really quick?
Please.
I have technically met Richard Branson. Oh, the flight when I was a kid, the flight that brought me here to America from England, where I was born. My parents flew on a Virgin Atlantic flight, and it was like, oh, this is the first plane of this new series, whatever plane it was. And Richard Branson was there, and he was going down the aisle saying hi to everyone. I'm sure hanging out in the front class. I imagine it's apocryphal, but apparently when he does do these things where he does fly and go, it's me, it's my plane, hey, what's up? Apparently he does pass out drinks and snacks and stuff. Oh, that's so rad. That's so cool. I don't know how true that is, but that's pretty awesome. Sorry, that's my only claim to fame.
Do what you can where you are with what you've got. And I like to see how far you can push that, because it goes far beyond anything that you could possibly imagine. Like I saw of something recently. It was a bunch of kids. It looked like in Africa, and they had created a dirt pool table with cues made out of dirt and the balls, and it worked. And they were sitting there playing pool in the middle
That's amazing.
of somewhere in Africa. And I was just like in awe. I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is amazing. So anyways, shall we talk about people's stuff? We're talking about us. Let's talk about you, our audience.
Let's talk about you. I think we need to show off some goodies on Discord, because I just peeked at it before the pod, and I just saw some stuff like that looks ridiculously complicated. I need to take a deep dive into it. So let's take a look at your guys' fantastic projects.
And I think I saw Ogre in here too. Yeah, I did see Ogre in here. So if you pop over to the I made a thing first, Ogre's is right here. And what I want to shout Ogre out for is last week we talked about a tool called newarc.ai. And it's what we've been using along with Dolly to kind of brainstorm ideas that are visual, which I don't know about you all, but like my visual brain is not all that great. I think that's the case for a lot of engineers, right? I just don't have it. I just can't figure it out. Yeah. Like artists really blow my mind. And look at this. So Ogre, huge shout out to you. Ogre designs his silverware tray here, mocks it up, and then also pulls it into newarc.ai right there. And you get this absolutely stunning brass. And you can imagine, like what I love about this is now you can imagine making it. That's what it does. You go, oh, I can do that. Even if I don't yet know how to do that, like I'm inspired to try to figure out how to make this thing out of brass. So shout out Ogre. Really, really cool. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for testing out Newarc. That is really cool.
Dude, that's so awesome. Speaking of brass, one of the things that is on my list of things to do, and I'm actually going to need the help of our lovely audience. There is a thing in metalworking or metal forging, metal casting, called Lost Wax casting, where essentially you sculpt a ring or metal, whatever you want, out of wax because it's really soft, pour concrete to fill it up. Then you can put this concrete slab into an oven. The wax melts out. Then you pour in molten metal, and that, which is now a cavity, cools down, crack off the plaster, and you've got your metal part. And you can do the same thing with PLA as well. You can print out a metal, anything you want, fill it with resin or with concrete. Not concrete, plaster. Don't put concrete in, fire explodes. Essentially melt out all the plastic, pour in metal. And one of our good friends is a blacksmith. And he's like, he told me years ago, oh, I've been meaning to do that for so long. And I think he might be moving shops soon. And it's been on my list for years. And so I think I want to do that pretty soon. And so if you guys have any really kick-ass ideas of stuff cast in metal, I think I really want like the wrought, ugly, kind of harsh metal look. My fiance said, "Oh, you should make the coins from Pirates of the Caribbean because those would look kind of gnarly, and metal out of brass would look really cool." That is awesome. I have the file. That's so cool. So if you guys have any other ideas, please post to the Discord because I just want to pour some molten metal. That just seems super cool.
It really does.
This just totally reminded me of it.
There's something about a crucible. I don't know what it is. I really can't tell you why, but it gives me a feeling. If I pick up a crucible with tongs, I feel like
early man Josh.
I feel like caveman Josh. There's something primal about it. I don't know what it is. I always felt that way when I had a crucible, especially when you have a crucible and a torch and tongs, and you're just melting metal inside of it. It's just like, well, this is pretty cool. Like, how can this not be cool? This is amazing.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I love that stuff. Now that I'm
good stuff,
looking
Ogre.
at this, just really quick before we continue on this topic, I think we've all run into images on the internet where we're now looking at it going, is it AI? Is it not? And I think it's actually going to be a fairly important skill in the future to be able to identify parts of an image that is fake. You know what I mean? Like, I think if we look at this, we go, well, yeah, that's actually really quite good. But if you look at the plant up top and then the plant in the reflection, they're totally different. And then this knife kind of melds into the fork. I think it's going to be a little bit part of investigative journalism in the future. Going, is this?
I actually don't. I think it's not. We're not very far off from not being able to tell at all. There may be some like little ticks and nuances that you can, but I think we're not going to be able to tell at all. And I wonder what it will do to trust, because I think if you look at what happened to the internet over the past 10 years, you'd have to say what was eroded at a large scale is trust, because you don't really know what you can believe. There's a lot of misinformation, right? But now we can just accelerate it. So I'm not a doomer here. I don't think that AI is going to destroy everything.
Downer, Josh.
I'm not trying to be a downer, but I do have questions about what it means to authenticity. And I hope, I mean, part of what I hope is that it reinvigorates us to go and meet people in person, to say hello, to shake hands, to hold physical objects, right? I think there's a huge role for these kinds of things. So yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Things are going to be odd, and almost nothing that you see online you can believe.
That is so doable. Anyway, continuing on, Spitfire is continuing working on this really rad. Oh my gosh, I totally forgot the name of it. It's not a floating plane. Is it a floating plane? Is that the name of it?
It's a float plane.
Plane. That's okay.
Float plane.
I was going to say seaplane again.
Oh, seaplane too.
Dude,
that works.
I'm so excited to see this.
A plane that takes off and lands in water.
I'm just so excited to see this. Getting into like RC is one of those big bubbles. We'll talk about this later. Is one of these really funky bubbles within making that's just like I will never be able to understand that. Therefore, I won't even try. But I'm gonna make a valiant effort this year to actually learn about a little bit deeper into that electronics. But dude, Spitfire, this is awesome. So I will totally watch this on YouTube later.
Yeah. So speaking of which, there's a little play button there for this RC. It's got a couple of fans on the back of it. I watched this video and I just was like, I want to make one of those. Like right now, I want, like in my head, I was just like, I could imagine the whole class. It was just like some pool noodles and a couple of rods and some fans on the back and a remote control. And I was like, this looks like so much fun. So if you're just listening or if you're just watching here, make sure you join the Discord, go to the I Made a Thing section and just watch this little video. I don't know why it's so satisfying, but I loved it. So awesome work, Spitfire. Thank you for showing that off.
One thing we will do, so at open source this year, there's a YouTuber called Peter Streeple who is amazing, and he is such a rad maker, but his whole niche is that he makes planes out of anything. So he's made an RC plane that uses a hand drill for thrust, that uses KFC buckets that are rotating parallel to the ground to create lift. He made a plane out of food, out of like biscuits. He was absolutely amazing. And he will be there. So if we do meet him, Richard, I will totally show this and show him off because I'm sure he'd love this kind of stuff. Continuing onwards, Ed, I think we showed this last week, but I just love this. Making little organizers for little electronic stuff is just still one of my most favorite things to do. Like, I just can never imagine buying a thing and not wanting to mod it in some way. It's just every time I get something, I'm like, I need to make this really quick. Regardless of how much I spend on it, I'm like, it's not perfect. I need to continue onwards. But dude, that is awesome. And I think that wraps up our Discord. Love it. Congratulations,
that wraps
everyone.
Up the I Made a Thing. Question though is, do we have any questions? I think we've had some general discussion stuff, right? Maybe some challenges.
From Mr. Minnick. Does anyone know how I can disable this weird view that components get when they are not activated? It's very hard to see the geometry of the non-activated. Yes, completely. So usually, I imagine in this case, this looks like a 3D printing hot end, and this looks like something. So if this item on the right is what you are making, you can actually go into. I'll actually show you. So I'm currently working on the Saturn V rocket that we have in the chapter 0 of our book that I'm going to be making actually with full detail, a little bit more cool. It's currently printing right now. You might be able to hear it. But if I'm currently working on the third section up top, I activate that. This bottom is still kind of in the way. It becomes transparent. And in this case, it's not too much of an issue. But if I try and go for like a top-down view, that's a nightmare to deal with because all of these geometries down here, as you can see, they can be projected upwards, and it's so annoying to work with. In this case, I only have like 4 components, so it's not the end of the world to go back and actually click all the eye icons to hide them. But even faster is to right-click on the component that you are working on, and then click on Isolate. And this will turn on or turn off all the others. And this works regardless of how many components you have. And then as soon as you want to bring it back, you can right-click and say unisolate, and then it brings everything back. There you go. And life is much better. And then as soon as you're done, activate the top thing. Anyway, but that looks awesome. Trying to get this combo to work. Oh gosh, what is that? So that's a direct. Oh, that looks that looks like a direct drive system. Is this I think this is a Voron printer, and I'm not quite sure what that is. That little board on the table.
No idea.
Funky. Dude, I'm excited to see that.
Let us know, PC Van Vliet.
Awesome. All right. I think we should move on to the topic of discussion for the day.
The topic of the day.
The topic of the discussion of the soup of the day du jour. I am currently, or both of us, we're in the process of now writing some of the new projects that are going to be coming out in addition to of the course and the book that should be coming out in a couple months, hopefully, knocking wood. And it is all about increasing the cool factor as high as we possibly can. So we're going to be getting rid of the silicon mold project and replacing it with a prototype drone, which is just miles cooler. It's just so much more rad. And I have to tip my hat to one of our most active members, Derriere, who's totally going to be helping me out in this project because he's a drone enthusiast in the Great White North. And he was showing me all of his homemade, home-built custom drones. And they just look so rad. And I'm like, yeah, this still feels so awesome. But as I'm doing this, it is seriously a huge rabbit hole of topic, and every single component in it is a huge rabbit hole to go into, whether it's size, specifications, material choice, weight class, speed, just so many different things. And as someone who is, I think, fairly good with the mechanics, but I self-acknowledged pretty poor on the side of electronics. I do have some kind of maker fear, some maker anxiety going into it, and I want to kind of showcase what Josh and I go through, where we say, I want to make this new thing in this new area, and I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea where to start, where I'm going to go wrong. I just kind of need to dive into the deep end and where we go wrong. And I think diving into the drone as an example is fantastic, because it is
so a couple things really.
Sorry, go ahead.
Couple things really quickly there, and I only want to interrupt you because it's relevant. So PC Van Vliet says to the Voron printer, it's a hot end for the Voron printer. I want to use on my bed slinger. The PCB is for converting the signal coming from a flat cable. It's quite the project with my limited skills. I still get horribly lost. So PC Van Vliet, Mr. Mitnick, we are talking to you in this episode because we also still get horribly lost. So welcome to the club. And Spitfire says, I'm a big fan of Peter Stripple, which is the guy I think that was mentioned to you. Stripples, which I think was the guy that you were told is the guy. He's the man.
He is
for
the
all
man.
this stuff, right?
Yeah. Anyway, so if we meet him, we will totally show him your design. But yeah, going back to drone, it is the whole purpose of this discussion is not drones. The whole purpose of this discussion is how do you go into any field in making, regardless of if it's mechanical or digital, software or hardware, 3D printing or woodworking, doesn't matter. How do you systematically say, I want to make this one project? And how do you research? How do you essentially dive into it and stay motivated? Because there's plenty of projects that I have that I've been so excited about and so ready, and then realize just what a gigantic cluster world it is, and got scared and then ran away with my tail between my legs. And I don't know. I find that happens for some projects, but not for other projects, and I've never been able to suss that out. But I think starting off, me going, I know about mechanics, 3D printing, metalworking, mechanical design, I got that down. But electronics and robotics and RC stuff, I don't know anything about it. Seriously, I don't know anything about it. And how do you kind of dive into it? And I think we should probably start with the research. The research is the most important part, but I think also dissection is pretty important. What do you think about that, Josh?
Yeah, I think zooming out from the actual physical process itself for just a second, the approach that I've always taken differs from project to project, but has a similarity in that it is kind of all over the place. And especially in the beginning, I am very much zigzagging back and forth between things, trying to figure out how to get my bearings, how to start, what resources I think I might need. And for this, we had talked last week, by the way, another shout out to Spitfire, who's been sharing all the HAL 9000 stuff. So last week, I was diving a little bit into the HAL 9000 stuff. How am I going to make the voice work? How do I start a project like this? Again, I know the CAD, I know the mechanical design side. I know that's not going to be an issue, so I don't really need to look too much at that. But I found myself going into AI, ChatGPT, asking questions. Where do I start? How do I start? Only to spend about 30 minutes in there and realize this doesn't feel right for me right now. Not that it's not the right way to go about it, but it felt like I wasn't making very much progress. So then I saw that some of those videos had been shared, and I watched a couple, and I realized, oh, I didn't have an overall context. I work very well visually. And so I realized, like, oh, I need to watch a couple of videos, especially if somebody's done something similar to it, just to get a general overall sense of it. And then maybe I can dive back into AI. Big point being, I almost never approach two projects exactly the same way, except that in the beginning, I'm very much searching for a resource that gets me from I know nothing to now I have some general vague sense of what I'm trying to do. And that's been my experience. But to the details, and to your point.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think to expand off of that, I think we both agree to a certain extent that if you want to get into a new area of making drone battle bots, doesn't really matter. I think the majority of people in the world will say, okay, well, dip your toe in, play around with an Arduino to get an LED to blink. And I think both of us will say, no, don't do that. Dive into the deep end, get into it, and you'll be shocked at how much faster you absorb information, because it's more of the academic way to go, oh, I'm going to start out super duper basic. I would say jump up 2 more rungs and kind of dive into it. If you're getting into Arduino and you want to just make an LED blink, you can do that in the better half of half an hour, really. If you go from knowing absolutely nothing. And I think it is vastly more interesting to then your first project be a row of LEDs that blink back and forth really, really quickly. I think that is you will learn vastly more about it at a higher speed.
I'm kind of curious. Here's what I'm kind of curious about this episode, Jake. You have told me what your approach is, and I kind of have a general sense of it in my head. So what I'm interested in, and what I think our audience will be really interested in, is your perception of how you go about it, and my perception of how you go about it. Because I actually think, so as we dive into the beginning stages here, so maybe the first couple of steps, I want you to say what the first 1 to 2 steps you think you have done are, and then I want to comment on that and say what I've observed from those first 2 steps of you. So go.
Okay. So I have looked at drones and I've gone, okay, I'm going to look at every single component, every single piece that goes into it. I don't care about the style or the size or the specification or anything. I just want to break it down into a list of what are the different pieces. So for a drone, you've got the frame. They come in a million different shapes and sizes and styles. I don't care about it. I just make a bullet point list, frame. Then there's the motors that spin. Then there's the propellers that get spun. Then there's the board, the actual circuit chip that goes on it. I don't know what goes into the circuit chip. I don't know how many there are in it. I don't know what it does. I don't care. Circuit board. Next one, battery. I think that's probably it. That's like what I can kind of bounce off the top of my head. Then you can kind of go in and look at the basic and fundamental types of drones and actually compare lists and go, oh, it actually has, well, some of them have fuses on there as well. Some of them have a charging board as well. Some of them have cameras. And you can start to kind of say, okay, I've added a couple things to my basic list, and now I've got kind of an expanded, oh, you can also have a camera. Oh, you can also have this and that on it. And kind of comparing those two is super important. But starting at I know nothing is super fantastic, because you don't need to go, what is the, I need to learn everything about this battery on it. I just need to know everything about batteries, which is surprisingly easy in my mind. I can then go through and say, okay, I'm going to research one of the most popular types of batteries on the drones, and I'll just make a list. And every single time, and I think this is the most important trick that I have, every single time that I come across a word that I don't know or a number that I don't know, I write it down, and this list just gets longer and longer and longer. And then as soon as I'm like, okay, I'm now duplicating some of the things that I don't know in this list, then I can kind of start up at the top. You go, okay, what is a MAH? Okay, well, that's milliamp hours. Okay, and then I can kind of understand that. That's capacity of the battery. Okay, what is 2S? That's something that I didn't know about yesterday. I've seen it a million times. And then Derry's just like, oh yeah, it just means there's 2 cells in series. So you can see on the front of it, there's two different voltage numbers, and one is half of the other. And it's like, perfect, done. And now every single time that I go back into this drone world that is still this kind of cloud of mist of stuff that I don't understand, I can at least pick some bits of information and go, I understand what that is. Then you go into motors and it says, oh, it goes at this RPM. It's like, I have no frame of reference. I have no frame of reference. But as long as I can look at some of the drones that I know roughly what I want, it'll give me a list of some variables. It'll say, oh, this one is 10,000 kV, 12,000 kV. No idea what that means. Put it on the list. And I just systematically go through every single component, and every single time that I come across a question where I go, hey, some propellers have just 2 blades, some of them have 3, some of them have a band around it, just keep on adding it to the list. And as you kind of successfully go through it over and over and over again, you'll develop a huge amount of information while still retaining that mindset of, I actually don't know anything. I'm not going to sit here and go, I know everything about batteries. I know everything about these boards. I still have this kind of self-diminishing idea that I don't know everything, and I'm still trying to learn as fast as possible.
Well, and I think one of the scary spots to go is when you go too deep down a rabbit hole about exactly how something works, you can almost lose the forest for the trees. Yes. I think that's the analogy that I would use is, now I need to know, well, what types of batteries can I use? And then you find that the project stalls a little bit because you're not quite there. And whether that's good or not good, I don't know for sure. But for me, that really gets me lost occasionally. So, okay. So the first step for you is break it down into the major components of the thing that you're trying to do. And you do that by doing some research on the internet.
This isn't actually true. The first thing that I did was I went onto a subreddit about drones, and I just posted a fairly naive comment saying, what are some good kit builds? Maybe I can find, something on Amazon where it's got all the pieces already pre-assembled, and I can just put it together and kind of understand about roughly what are all the things. Maybe not the different types of motors or propellers or boards or this and that, but I can roughly get an idea of how they go together and scale. And immediately, like 10 downvotes, people going, you're not giving us any information. Do you want one that goes for speed? Because some drones can go up to, 100 mile an hour plus. Do you want one that has, that has enough weight capacity to hold a really nice camera? Do you want it to be able to have live viewing, first person views that actually goes to goggles that Dairy was showing me that are amazingly cool? Oh, do you want it to have a GoPro or like a mirrorless camera that has a good lens on it for like cinematographic users? Do you want it to be for racing? Do you want it to have flips? Do you want it to be gigantic to pick up packages and drop them off somewhere? Or do you want it to be tiny and micro so it can fit in your pocket? There's some drones that are waterproof that can go underwater and propel themselves. It's like there's so many different variations.
So I think what I'm getting out of this is get clear with what it is that you're trying to achieve by doing the thing sooner rather than later.
Yes.
So the drone example is, as soon as you start to realize there are many different types of drones, try to figure out what purpose your drone is going to serve. Yes. And then narrow your research down to that.
Yes, exactly. Just to bring it into the BattleBots world, this is something that I'm also really stoked about. And then you do a little bit of research on how do I make a BattleBot, and the first thing that comes up is what weight class do you want, and that is the massive specifications. Do you want the one that is like 250 pounds that actually fights on TV? If you want to, they're about as expensive as a brand new car to build. Or do you want one that's mainly 3D printed that has that's very accessible to make? That's about £1. Or do you want one that's a little bit more intense? Oh, you've got a welder, you've got some metalworking skills, you can make the £3 one. Those have got metal blades and stuff. And so it really does start to classify, start the classification process pretty early on. And you may not know exactly what you want, but you'll definitely know what you don't want or what you don't care about. I think that's more important. Knowing what you don't care about is massively important.
Yep.
I think it's pretty big. Yeah. And then go on. Okay, so I think after that point, talking with people like Derry, who has a huge amount of knowledge, and having them being able to point me to different areas, go, oh, check out this YouTuber, check out this YouTuber. That's gigantic. That is so handy. It's just giving me a huge plethora of information. And
I would generally flip that. I would generally flip that in my workflow. Not necessarily. I mean, look, we're talking about our workflows here, so there's no right and wrong way. But in my workflow, if I say one of the rules of thumb I have is who, not what. So we talk about that a lot in our business. If somebody else has done, we're trying to grow our YouTube channel, right? So if somebody else has built a YouTube channel with 500,000 followers, shout out to one of our friends who has, instead of how do I make a thumbnail for my video, I go, who do I know that knows how to make thumbnails? And let me go ahead and just have a conversation with them. And by the way, this circles back to something really important as we talk more and more about AI and we try to supplement our work with it, is I think a lot about trade-offs. So what do you give up by doing something? And one of the questions that I
Mhm.
don't think is being asked very much with AI is, what are you giving up by using it? And I would argue the most important thing that a lot of people are giving up is asking another expert's opinion. Yes, you're getting the general
Mm.
advice from an all-knowing master, right? But you have to ask yourself, what are the things that I would otherwise do if I didn't have this tool? And is that possibly a better approach to this? So I would argue
Mhm.
the who is absolutely critical. And I'll give you another example. You remember when I was developing the Bluetooth speaker to teach
Mhm.
kids how to make one at the workshop? One of the things I
Mhm.
needed to learn for that was leather working, because I wanted to make a custom leather handle and I didn't know how to do it. And I did this classic, let me research it online. Let me go ahead and go to YouTube. And then somebody said, well, why don't you just go over to Tandy Leather, the leather store near us, have a look
Mhm.
around and find it, right? So what I did is I went over to Tandy Leather, and I didn't intend to do this. And I had a strap, a leather strap. I had a whole bunch of them. They were pre-cut. They were ready to go. We were just going to do some basic leather stuff with them, and that was it. And I sat like 60 of these leather handles down on the table, and the guy at the store looks at me and he says, What are you doing?" But when somebody asks you a question and it's not really a question. They just think you're an idiot, right? So it was in
Yeah,
this moment that I
which is
go,
very powerful.
uh, very, very powerful. If you can recognize that, great. And it stopped me from buying them. And I said,
Mhm.
actually, I don't know what I'm doing. I said, I came over here to buy some leather handles. That's all I know. He's like, okay, that's not right. I said, what do you mean that's not right? And then I proceeded to have a 2.5 hour conversation where he walked me around the store and taught me how to make a leather handle from scratch using raw leather. And he's like, so it ended up being the best masterclass I could have possibly imagined in
Mhm.
those 2.5 hours. And I learned more than I think I would have learned in 2.5 weeks. And if I had tried to go about this using
Definitely.
AI or YouTube tutorials or something else like that, I don't think I would have gotten nearly as far. So the who, not what, is a framework that I would highly encourage people to start with. And because we've got almost 1,000 people, maybe more than 1,000 on our Discord at this point, we somebody in here knows somebody. So ask,
Yeah.
hey, does anybody know
Mhm.
anything about making a drone? And then talk to those folks and use that as a jumping off point so that they can say, hey, this is the YouTube guy you need to talk to. Hey, this is the one
Mhm.
resource you should start with. Hey, let me filter my 20 years of experience through the lens of getting started today. And so
I will
that's how
back that
yeah.
with saying that the other side of it is you kind of need to have if you can either post out saying, "Can anybody help me?" or kind of hunting out for people. The only way that I saw that Dairy was this person who knew lots and lots and lots about building drones was because they posted about it. So if you have a niche of building anything, please post it because I guarantee you there'll be someone out there that goes, "That's awesome. I want to do that too." I think I've told this story before. When I was in high school, I never posted any of my woodworking or metalworking projects on Instagram until like a couple months before my senior year ended. And I, by the end of it, people who had never talked to me in 4 years came up and go, "I didn't know you did woodworking. I didn't know you did this. That's awesome. That's so cool. Can you make me one? Can you teach me how to make one?" I had a friend who was a massive pothead, and he said, "Hey, can you sculpt me like a Gandalf pipe and smoke some weed out of?" I said, "Absolutely," and I made it for him over the weekend. And he was like, "Dude, this is awesome." And I made a little case for it. And it was blown away. And I'm like, "Yeah, this took me maybe 4 hours, and I had a ton of fun with it." Bad example, but really,
Yeah.
but
I mean, that's a fine
but
example. Yeah.
yeah, but I think encourage people to post what they make in their real niches and specifications is incredibly handy. And to bring it back to your conversation of going up to the leather worker and saying, "I don't know what I'm doing," I commend that a lot. That's a degree of vulnerability that is not easy to do. Really not easy.
Well, and honestly, when you start to do that internet research, you start to think that maybe I know something about this topic. And it
Yes, you
gives you
can
this
so
false
delude
sense.
yourself.
Correct. And then you're actually less inclined. I keep saying you. I'm actually really talking about me. I become less inclined to ask the questions to open
Mhm.
myself up to that vulnerability, because now I think I know. And I think
Yeah.
and I really do struggle with that. I think that's for me,
Mhm.
I I get to this space where I think I know something, and then I speak with confidence about it, and then I meet somebody who really does know something, and it reminds me, oh, I was just fooling myself. What am I doing here?
Yeah.
And I'll say something else.
I
Right alongside of the people thing, our good buddy Truman, who was the former chief designer of Mazda, our good buddy Truman used to say something that really resonated with me. He said, "When you're starting something new, find your people." And by find your people, find your community, like go hang out. And if you're going out to these places, and maybe this is a great suggestion too for people deciding whether or not they want to develop a project, which by the way would be the precursor to this. Should I even do it is maybe a more important question. But he would say, if these are not the sort of people that you want to spend your time with, don't do it. Don't do it. Like, don't spend your time making the thing. We love working with the 3D printing community. We love the product development world. We love the people that we choose to spend our time with are people, even if it's a quote unquote business thing, are people that we would want to spend our time with anyway. So that idea of find your people is more than just find one person, but find a community of folks in your area, online or somewhere else, that are actively working on and doing these things. It could be a forum, it could be Reddit, it could be these internet things are definitely possible. But I think find your people is just so important. In addition to find that expert or find the.
I'm almost
doesn't even have to be an
positive there's
expert.
like a SoCal drone group. There's got to be.
So again, who not how,
I need to find
and who
them.
not what.
Yeah.
Definitely. Who not what, who not how. You go, you spend your time with them, you ask them questions, you get to know them, and then before you know it, you actually do know something.
I'm gonna add just a little bit of contrarian context to that. There are plenty of making disciplines that are filled with lovely, kind, nice people, and there are, I still think fewer sub communities of making that are filled with rude, exclusionary people. The CNC metal world is usually pretty tight knit. The manual mill world is pretty, you don't know what you're doing. What do you mean? That looks awful kind of community. That's the vibes that I've gotten. And that's exactly the vibes that I've gotten in person as well. There was a place, a metal supply business that was really close to our old workshop. And anytime you go there, if you had a question about, oh, there's 5 different alloys of aluminum, I don't know which one to get, it was damn near impossible to ask anybody there to help you out, because they just have this, I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to help you. I went there with a massive bushy beard. I get helped immediately. I went there clean shaven. Nobody even looked at me. It's really, really weird kind of sub communities that will welcome you in open arms and stoked that you're excited. And then there's other communities that are just not with it, and that kind of sucks. And it does feel a little lonely.
To that point, yeah. So there are instances where the community is not exactly the community one, but I would argue you're part of a larger subset of communities, which would be the maker community, and it's like you largely jive with that. And I want to say something important about the maker community. So I did a podcast a few weeks ago with one of our charter school partners, and we were talking about what is a maker space, what is this maker movement, why is it important. And then when I started to talk about woodshop, the podcast host said, when I think about a woodshop, I think about a dark, dingy place with like wood panels. And it immediately made me realize what was so powerful about the maker movement was that when you think about the maker movement, I think about bright, cheery, fun, wacky, robotic,
cool stuff on the
weird,
wall.
cool. That's what it conjures up. But when I think about metalworking, when I think about woodworking, classic supposed skills, especially gate kept skills, I think about these dark, dingy places. And I think it's really important as makers that we change that perception. So if you are a machinist or if you are a woodworker and you are teaching other people, I am begging you, can you make your shop bright and colorful and beautiful and put plants in it and just work to change this perception, because those skills are so fundamental to what we do.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get through to the people we want to get through to teaching them if we continue to present it in a way that's a dark, dingy basement. Or you get shop talk is also a thing that just kills it, especially for women. We don't have a ton of women in our community. This is a mainly male-dominated community. There are some, and we definitely love that, and we're always asking ourselves, how do we get more? But you got to make this place inviting. So if you walk in and it's shop talk and it's, it's like this negativity and it's this like overly sexist, this is not fun. This is not fun for anybody.
Yeah.
So I'm pleading with the makers who have these classic skills. You have something fantastic to share, and presentation, please. Sorry,
I tell you,
Jake. This is the episode of tangents, apparently.
Oh yeah, no, I'm gonna tangent your tangent. I go on a lot of welding subreddits because I love welding, aeronautics, underwater welding, so rad. The amount of posts that I see of people going, "I'm a newbie," and I walked in with my respirator and welding, and everybody else around me was going, "You don't need a respirator." And then at the end of like a week, they pull out the filters and they are jet black. It's like, yeah, there's a reason that culture kind of blows, that people are totally advertent to getting into welding. It kind of sucks. Anyway, I want to get back to drone making.
It has that like dingy. So back to drone making. And by the way, really quickly, Joestry says, if anybody wants to know about combat robots, he is the man. I have a small challenge for you all this week. I have a small challenge for you all this week, and that is, if you've got a skill set or something like that, just post us and let us know what it is. Tell people in the Discord how you're willing to help if you have a skill. And I'd like to start to kind of foster that community a little bit, just proving to people, hey, there's somebody here that knows something that you'd like to know. And then hopefully some of you connect offline as well. So back to it, Jake. So we've got just to bring it back full circle, we've got the, scan, try to figure out what the rough, loose components are. We talked about, whether or not you should make it first. If you've decided you're going to make it, diving in and actually figuring out what it's made of, chatting to people in the community. I think that's where we left it.
I think continue going on and actually talking to people will give you so many more nuggets of information that going on to ChatGPT will not give you. I wrote this down, Derry. I will be including it in the book. We were chatting about some of the drone people that are flying and getting footage of the ocean near me, and they will fly out quite a ways, like a mile out into the ocean, and then you just see people with their controllers on the beach, and they go, no, and then it falls into the ocean and it's gone forever. And Joshi said, yep, always fly into the wind, and then as soon as it's 50%, fly back. I'm like, that's genius. That is so genius. Like, yeah, if you fly if you fly into the wind and then at 50% try and turn back, he's like, you're never going to get the drone back.
Have you ever taken a long kayak or paddleboard trip? You never forget that lesson if you've done that. Because you're like, oh my, I'm just jamming, right? Or bike ride is the same way. I've gone on rides that it's like 50 miles one way and 50 miles the other, and I had the wind at my back, and I feel like $1 million, and like I'm the man. I can just conquer this world. And then you're 50 miles in the wind coming back the other way, just hating your life. So anyways, back to you. But yes,
you just gave me a flashback of being a Boy Scout and kayaking, canoeing from the Hoover Dam down the Colorado River, and then having to turn around, come back. Oh my god. Awful.
Only takes once.
Anyway,
and then every time you're like, I know where the current's going. I know where the wind is.
Yeah. Go back to drone making. I do think that, as we always say, diving in is something super important. One of the plans that we're going to be doing is for the book to make a relatively simple one within the span of drone making, which is already fairly complex. Making a simple one. So showing you all the simple components that go into it, and if you want to customize it, parametrically make it any different way, go for it, because that's going to be so fantastic. And then for one of the content videos that we're going to be putting out in reference to it, we're going to be blowing it up and making it way cooler, way more rad, making it out of carbon fiber and all that good stuff. So that is down to come, but I still have this, like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I know I want to make a smaller drone that is simple, in quotations, but I'm still planning on making a significantly more complicated one. That's probably double the size, probably significantly higher cost, but I'm still going to do that in the near future. And having that, having that kind of gaze of a reasonable goal and then a, oh, that'd be so rad kind of goal just off into the distance to keep me going. That's pretty powerful. That's pretty fantastic. And
Okay.
just continuing off of that, now that we have a ton of information, ton of research about all the components, then it's like, all right, get going. Start building some stuff, start doing some testing. And that is the best thing in the world. The one thing that I'm like, oh, I don't know anything about this is like remote controls and stuff. So I'm starting to get into the position where I'm like, oh, I need to start researching motors and I need to start buying stuff, but I still don't know some of the areas about some of the other components, and that's kind of fine to just kind of dive into it. You will be making mistakes. If you think that you won't make a single mistake and you won't need to buy something twice, you are deluding yourself. You will always have to buy something twice. It's just how it goes. No project, no weekend project has ever been done and you just went to Home Depot once. It's never happened. Not in a million years. 2 or 3 times at least. I think that's a fair assessment of that.
2 or 3 times a day.
Yeah, I bet. I'm just really excited to get into it. I think this will be a ton of fun. I think this will be really jiving with the CADclass brand, whatever that means. It's just cool projects. I think that's just the brand.
I think I know what that means. No, so what you and I have been strategizing about how we can add even more value to the course itself online, right? So the cadclass.org 28 step-by-step projects, those are all really fun. We've been super inspired by what people share for us. And they're like, look, all the things that they made. I remember the domino from one of our students a while back that was just mind-blowingly cool, right? So seeing how far people can push the limits. And so you and I have decided that we're going to try to show people what can be done with these skills and like really make it amazing. So for example, behind you, you've got the Saturn V you've been working on and talking about, right? And we're talking about making it look real and yeah, exactly. Making it look real and blowing it up and then actually adding to the number of things that you could do once you've learned how to make the basics. How far could I take these skills? And so our YouTube presence, we hope to be, for lack of a better word, we keep using it. I really hate it, but edutainment, where it's really entertaining.
I don't mind
it's
that
super high value. It's packed with information, but it's like, this is the next level. This is where you could take this when you want to go somewhere. So that's the goal.
I think that's a rad goal. I think that's exactly what we need to do.
And we will be.
I think
so.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think that's it. That's where I'm at with the drone building project. I have kind of getting onto more of the research onto different components. I think we've locked down a style. Derry and I are probably going to be working on building out some of the different parts and all the different CAD of it. But I'm just kind of giddy to get going. One of the things that I think a lot of makers have, I talked about earlier, is move fast or you'll just lose enthusiasm. And I know I know that's not the best personality trait, but it's totally something that I have. If I have an idea and I'm getting just so energized and so buzzed for it, dude, it's like, I gotta go. I will, as soon as like I found out that one of our shops is getting a wood lathe, I was vibrating with energy. I literally drove home and started designing things immediately. And then I probably stayed up until 3 a.m. doing research on it. So I think if you're one of those people that knows that you tend to burn out, my burnout rate is probably about a month. If I have the idea for something and I don't build it within a month, the likelihood of me actually finishing it, unless I recognize it's like this is, I recognize some projects are like will take over the course of like years to build just because of complexity, or I don't have this tool, or I don't have access to this material yet. Like I will eventually one day finish my Han Solo blaster. I've made a bunch of the pieces to it, but yeah, I don't have access to a German Mauser. I don't have the funds to buy that and then to mill it up. So yeah, it's all the components are in nicely labeled plastic bags, some silica packets in there in my drawer of many things. It's like, yeah, I'll get to that later.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you get stuck, I have one particular point that I think I finally overcame, and I have our old workshop to thank for that. But there's this one point in projects that really stops me from doing things. And it's a psychological thing. That thing for me is money. And not that I don't have it, but I get really funky about spending money on things. And so I get hyper obsessed with finding deals and making sure that it's like its reviews are correct. And so do you find that you have this as well, where you find a
Do you get
motor
that
and then
for
you're
the
like, I'm going to
tools or
research
for
every
material?
motor? Both, but like I research everything to death, and it's not always a good quality. I get in so deep sometimes, and I research it and research it and research it and make all these things. And you know what I eventually do anyway? I make an emotional decision. So after all this research and all these check boxes and all these things, I end up going, screw it, I'm just going to buy that one. And it becomes completely emotional.
Yeah.
And I found that for years, what prevented me from doing it was this research. I got too deep into trying to find the correct perfects, the 10 out of 10 reviews, like what everybody else uses, and I didn't move fast enough. Do you get that too?
Yeah. I kind of differently. So I usually start with buying tools for a specific project and kind of build up an arsenal where I go, oh, I really like this brand. They make this tool. I want to buy it, or I need to now buy it to make this project. And it's a silly way to think about it from like a cost perspective, where it's like, oh, I made a lightsaber, and the material to make this lightsaber was like, if I 3D printed it, is like a couple bucks in plastic, but I had to buy a $300 3D printer to make it. Therefore, this plastic lightsaber is $302, and it's a silly way to think about it. But then you have that tool, and having a project that you know you need to buy a tool for is totally the way to do it. Don't even think, or I'm very fortunate to say that I don't even, if I'm so excited, I don't need to think about, oh, will I use this in the future? It's like, no, just get it, just go. Like, keep that energy, jump into it and dive into it. I think that is my approach to it. My research to death is usually on the project itself. And I kind of get invigorated by that. I tend to not have a dip because as soon as I keep on riding that high of, oh my god, I'm so excited about this one thing, then I get to go off and tell my friends and tell my family and my loved ones about this one random thing I don't care about. I'm so excited to tell them about it. Oh my god, this bit on Obi-Wan Kenobi's lightsaber, this weird thing. This is from a plastic faucet knob that they made in the 1940s, and I just found it on eBay. And it's like, they don't care at all.
This is one of the beauties of the internet and our community, and the communities like it, right? It's like, you don't actually have to have the same interests as the people around you. There's somebody else out there who has it. You don't have to bore them to death. I'm the same way. Tell my significant other, tell my friends, they're like, oh, wow, cool. Even with the books that we publish, right? I get all jazzed and I'm like, oh, did you see this? And I get into it. Everybody else, like, people are excited.
I do the same thing.
I'm like limited.
When I 3D print little holders and little organizers for my toolbox, and I open up a drawer and everything is immaculately organized in it. What is the French cooking term? Everything in its place. Oh, mise en point? No. Oh gosh, totally forgetting it. There's a French term where, as you're cooking, every single ingredient is in its own little cup, its own little holder. Everything is in its place. That's the French translation. And then as you're cooking, you just go, oh, I need thyme, rosemary, paprika, yada yada yada, and you end up in an absurd amount of both. But the actual cooking process is so much nicer, and I have that exact same affinity towards toolings. As soon as I open it,
PC Van Vliet has it. It's
mise en place. Thank you very much.
There it is.
and as soon as I have the
pleasure of hearing your French accent along with it.
Thank you very much. I took 3 years of French, and I don't even know it.
Yeah.
And
voila.
And I show this to my friends and family, and they don't care, and that's all right. That's fine.
Yep.
I think that's a nice spot to leave it.
Great spot to end it. This has been. What are you gonna say? I almost got into it. What were you gonna say there?
This has been the CADclass podcast. Thank you guys very much for joining us. We'll be here next week talking about CAD, 3D printing, making, and a little bit of philosophy here and there. Thank you very much for watching, guys. We'll see you next week.
Cheers, everybody. Talk next week.
Cheers.